This is the first of 7 chapters about the most important thing in our life, and that would be time. This first chapter is about the most important aspect of time, and that would be now. I just answered the question, how important is now? Yehidi Menuhin said, music creates order out of chaos, for rhythm imposes unanimity upon the divergent, melody imposes continuity upon the disjointed, and harmony imposes compatibility upon the incongruous. The baby and infant live in the world of now. If we were all to live more closely to this natural state, maybe we would have more happiness. Music is the universal way to experience being in the now. Plato said it a little more simply than Yehidi Menuhin. He said, music and rhythm find their way into the secret places of the soul. For me, music's already there in the secret places, and it works its way out every chance it gets. Unless I'm consciously doing something or thinking about a particular thought, there's music in my head. Not music that I've heard before, usually just patterns. And sometimes it's monotonous patterns, I have to say. I'm constantly tapping my foot or fingers on something, which is annoying to almost everyone except me. I was always aware of this, but because of researching this, I've become keenly aware how much time my mind spends playing the patterns in my head. Music fills virtually every slack moment of my consciousness. I think almost everyone has a piece of music or song that brings them to tears of joy. It's I call it triggering songs. Something this strong doesn't escape the eye of Big Brother, the government. Music has such a power over our minds that institutions and governments have attempted to regulate it for centuries. The Greeks and Romans believed that only music played in the Dorian mode was respectable. Dorian mode, same as playing just the white keys on piano. So Plato would have approved of Eleanor Rigby by the Beatles and Smoke on the Water by Deep Purple, which are both composed in the Dorian mode. More recently, the Taliban regime in Afghanistan banned almost all forms of fun, and music was considered particularly bad, except religious and patriotic songs, provided they were not accompanied by musical instruments. Musicians caught playing were beaten with their instruments and imprisoned. The Ayatollah Khomeini banned music from Iranian television and radio in 1979. Governments fear the power of music to open people's minds to ideas that might transcend their authority. Music really does find its way into the secret places of the soul. There are many reports of people in comas that have regained consciousness when they hear certain songs sung. Christmas carols seem to work well in these cases. Prematurely born babies are sometimes not neurologically mature enough to execute the suck, swallow, breathe rhythm required for feeding. At the Florida State University, researchers discovered a musical cure. Pressure-sensitive pacifier was hooked to a tape player that would play a lullaby when the baby sucked the pacifier. The infants often mastered the skill in minutes, and on average suckled 2.4 times faster than those not given the musical awards. I don't know if this has any effect on adults that were preemies, but I've heard they can be smartasses sometimes. It's just better than funny. Chanting and humming the sound is a meditative tradition that helps lead to the divine. Cats certainly seem to be on a different level when they purr. The frequency that they purr, it's between 20 and 50 cycles per second, is the same as the frequency that's been shown to cause human bones to become stronger and denser. Not only can sounds be soothing, they can be healing. Rhythm and music are as much a part of being human as language is. As a matter of fact, scientists can now prove that music occupies more parts of our brain than language, and some scientists theorize that music was one of the sparks that led to the development of language. Rhythm has incredible effects on the brain. Tourette's syndrome is described as having tics, which are sudden, non-rhythmic movements or utterances. Most people think of Tourette's as the sudden yelling of obscene words or inappropriate remarks, although only a small percentage of people with Tourette's actually have this form. It's well known that participation in drum circles can, within seconds, completely suspend all of these tics in people with Tourette's. The rhythm totally reconfigures the brain into a sense of now, and the brain forgets the tics. Being involved in the creation or playing of music has been shown to have significant effects on the development of the brain. Using MRI brain imaging, Gottfried Schlag at Harvard was able to show increased volume in many areas of the brain. Oliver Sacks, in his book Musicophilia, says anatomists today would be hard put to identify the brain of a visual artist, a writer, or a mathematician, but they could recognize the brain of a professional musician without a moment's hesitation. Other scientists have gone on to show that these changes occur as a result of musical training and are not just people with predisposition to be musically oriented. The Mozart effect showed that even brief exposure to classical music could temporarily enhance cognitive ability. Sachs states that for the vast majority of students, music can be every bit as important educationally as reading or writing. Music also has a unique connection to our memories. How many times have you heard a song that casts you back to the past time of joy or happiness? It's much easier to remember a song than a series of words not connected to pitch and rhythm. Evidently, one of the legal ways in many states in the USA of establishing if someone is under the influence of alcohol is ask them to recite the alphabet. If they start singing the alphabet song, they're probably intoxicated. People know when their judgment is impaired and instinctively resort to the most dependable technique of recalling the alphabet for them, which is music. The melody, by the way, for the alphabet song and Twinkle Twinkle Little Star is actually from Mozart's Ah, vous diriez maman. Now, my French is not that great, but you know what to sing to people that like Mozart. Translating our world into music is becoming more widespread. Scientists have translated the structure of genes, the form of protein molecules, and human DNA into music. And like so many things in our world, there seems to be a connection. Goodall says the pentatonic scale is embedded in our genes. The pentatonic scale is the most common pattern to learn when you want to improvise. Maybe it more closely resembles our natural structure than any other musical relationships. I've begun to think of the music patterns that are a minute by minute part of what is happening in my head as derived from some innate programming. Maybe these patterns are a fractal reflection of how my brain is evolving or changing. Fractals are geometric shapes that look the same under any degree of magnification. Fractal structures in nature include snowflakes, crystals, mountain ranges, cauliflower, and blood vessels. Fractals are being translated into music, and when British composer Phil Thompson first heard the results, he said he was slightly scared. I presume he was scared of the reality of musical patterns being so closely tied with the reality of our universe. Perhaps when Nietzsche said, without music, life would be a mistake, he was not talking only about the value of music for our well-being, but that life without music would not be philosophically compatible with the world as it really is. The most musically diverse animals are the birds. Even before I could talk, according to my parents, I could whistle. I still whistle a lot, and often I find curious birds coming close to me to see where the noise that they relate to is coming from. Birds use similar rhythms, note combinations, and musical patterns to those that humans use. Some birds even have their own instruments. The male palm cockatoo of northern Australia makes his own drumsticks from twigs and holds it with his foot to beat on hollow logs. Musical instruments have an ancient tradition. A three-holed flute made from a mammoth tusk and dated around 35,000 years old has been found in a cave in southern Germany. Seven-hole bone flutes dated to about 4,000 years old have been found in the Indus Valley. Today, the seven-hole flute or recorder is a standard music instrument for children to learn at an early age. I think everyone should learn at least one song on one instrument in addition to singing. My top 7 instruments I think everyone should play at least one of are keyboard, recorder or flute, guitar, harmonica, crystal glass, just for fun, mandolin, violin. And we'll get right into that. The keyboard or piano is the most common instrument in the Western world. It offers the most visual representation of music theory and the best means of one person controlling melodic and harmonic interplay. So it's become the most preferred instrument for composers. So if you want to write music, the best instrument to learn is the piano. The recorder, this is a great instrument. If you don't want to put in the 10,000 hours it takes to be a master of most of the other instruments here. Plastic recorders are cheap, light, generally with a good sound, depending on the player mostly. Let's cut and let's go to some of those instruments. Actually, I decided to make the section on the instruments a complete separate section. So the third instrument that I would recommend people learn is the guitar. It's very versatile. It's a symbol of freedom, independence. It's a great instrument to travel with. They make nice, very nice travel guitars. If you want to just have fun with music, learn the guitar. The harmonica, this is the best instrument you can put in your pocket. But then there's not much else to compare to. The Jew's harp, yeah, just not much. Harmonica is a blast, and I just took it up the last couple of years because it's something you can play when you're hiking, when you're riding a lift. There's just practically anywhere. Well, you don't want to disturb people, but fifth thing, just for fun, learn to ring a glass. It doesn't have to be crystal, but it needs to be thin. Most wine glasses will work. You have to wet your finger a little and rub the finger tab where your fingerprint is on the rim of the glass in a circular motion. As your finger dries, the friction will cause the glass to ring. It's a fun way to teach an entire table to play an instrument before getting up from the table. Most people can do this in a few minutes. Number 6, mandolin. The mandolin is tuned the same as the violin, so it makes it for a natural instrument for violins to take up if they're going to go on a long road trip and want to play in the car. That's how I got started. And I most recently have taken a ukulele and tuned it with new strings as a mandolin. The reason being, my fingers are very delicate and I can finger pick nylon strings a lot better than the steel strings of the mandolin. The 7th instrument, violin. It's often said to be the most difficult instrument to master. I wouldn't recommend it unless you love challenges, learning very slowly. or you like the feeling of accomplishing something really hard. Otherwise, it's my favorite instrument. The violin is said to be the remnant of nomadic horsemen of Mongolia, and the bows today are still strung with horsehair from Mongolia. The hourglass shape of the violin is a constant reminder to me of how music is the movement of sound through time. I started the violin because my father said that my grandmother had an old violin that was probably fairly valuable, and it's not really. It's not like a $100,000 violin or something. But my grandfather had bought it around 1920 in San Francisco. Paid nearly as much as what you could buy a house for then. I think that might be what he told my grandmother, who was the violinist. But according to estimates by luthiers now, it would barely be worth a nice addition to your living room, and that would be in a very cheap place to build living rooms. It has a unique sound, however, that I've never run across in another violin, and I had a lot of, I played in competitions when I was young, and I had a lot of judges that wanted to see it after they had heard it. I learned to play on it, so it's created a special addition to the living room of my mind. Learning to play a musical instrument as an adult, it's much more difficult than as a child because of the demands on our time as adults. That's why if you have the chance to encourage a child to learn an instrument when they're young, use whatever methods of persuasion, except force, that you can think of to get them to learn. If, as a parent, you play, it's a huge incentive. If you set up rewards at certain levels of achievement, it gives the child a sense of accomplishment that's a reward in itself. I believe if you find a song you like, no matter how hard, you can learn that song by learning the basics that go into it. I started violin when I was 12 and played for about 7 years. And then I pretty much put it away until I was about 44 years old. And then I started playing again because I found some jazz violin songs that I wanted to learn to play. Within about 6 months, I was back to my previous ability and starting to learn songs that were way above my head. Within a couple of years, I was able to play songs I never would have thought that I could. Now, it's a goal of mine to play my favorite songs in exotic, beautiful, natural places, which I've been able to do, and record them for myself and friends who could appreciate it, but it's just plain fun for me. Have you ever heard music in your head? Have you ever thought about what the music is like? You know, I set a goal of practicing violin when I started again at 15 minutes a day. I started with 15 minutes because it's small enough not to interfere with anything else. And when I do it, I have a sense of accomplishment. And if I'd had chosen a bigger number, I would often have said, yeah, I don't have time now. I'll do it later. You ever have that problem? Saying, I'll do it later? That would be the next aspect.